Hello everybody, this is the vinyl edition of my record update. So let's start with Don Huonot, Don Parhaat, 1990-2015. This is a band that I was always knew right from the beginning, but I never bought anything from them until they reformed late last year for one gig, and this winter they played a few gigs, so I went to see them. And now that they released another compilation, I decided to finally buy something from them. So after 25 years, I finally have one album from them. And another one, Melrose, Got It Made. They released their first album in 13 years, which in Finland is absolutely a phenomenal time. This is both a pleasant surprise and a disappointing, because their earlier albums have always been like a contained burst of energy, but this one actually has moved away from that, and it's more like more of a songwriter's album than just a huge energy burst. So I do like it, but it's a clear departure from their past. Joan Jett and the Black Hearts, Glorious Results of a Misspent Youth. Last year when this was released on RSD, I was going to pay a stupid amount of money for this one, but I managed to not to do so, and now I found this second hand. So I'm both pleased that I didn't buy that, didn't pay crazy amount of money for this one, and that I finally have this. Next one was, I would say, a perfect timing. I had only thought about buying this album for maybe 2 or 3 months when I noticed that these albums are going to be reissued on vinyl. So I went and got it. The Who, Face Dances. I had always read about these last two Who albums that they are disappointing, but it's not a disappointment to me at all. I think this is a very good album. Obviously the style has changed since let's say Quadrophenia, but I like this album. I think it's really good, so I'm very pleased that I have this now. And the next one is also the Who album, but the one that I had decided long ago that I would not buy, a quick one. And when I bought this, I didn't actually remember why I had decided not to buy this one. But when I got home and put this record on, I remembered that it was because this album is not dominated by Pete Townshend's song, but every member of the band had their hand in writing songs for this one. So I always thought that that doesn't really sound a good idea, since both Roger Daltrey and Keith Moon are not known for their songwriting. But yeah, it was a good one. Not my favorite Who album, but a good Who album nonetheless. And the next one I have had on CD for who knows how long, but now that I found out that this was released on vinyl, I decided to get it. Frank Sinatra, In a Wee Small Hours. The main reason why I wanted this on vinyl was this cover. I think this captures the mood and the feeling of the album perfectly, and it's absolutely gorgeous album cover. And I had real trouble getting this. I actually ordered this from one of the record stores here, was it 2 or 3 times, and even on the last time before it finally arrived, it took longer than what I was told. I was told that it should arrive in a week about week or week and a half, and it took about was it 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks until it finally arrived. So it was difficult to get, but I finally got it. Fatboy, Overdrive, a Swedish rockabilly band. I had known them since the beginning, but I had never really paid much attention to them until was it week ago, we finally went to see them, and I really like this. excellent modern rockabilly band, which it has just a tinge of a country to it, and it's more, well, calling it modern rockabilly may be a bit wrong. It's closer to 50s rock and roll, maybe. It's always difficult to say. Well, let's say rockabilly band anyway. Status Quo, Dog of Two Head. This was the last one from the early boogie period that I was missing. And I might have even passed this one had I paid closer to attention. Because when I picked it up, I noticed that it says Pi Records. And I did check the vinyl to see if it's in good condition. But I didn't notice that this was actually on PRT Records, because this is a Spanish pressing. That might have put me off. But yeah, the second album from the boogie period, in my opinion, they started with their previous album, Mark Ellis Greasy Spoon. So their style is really, they haven't really perfected the boogie style here yet. There are good songs here, but they're still like trying to find their feet. I think that their first perfect boogie album is the following one, Pile Driver. Rolling Stones, Sticky Fingers, double album edition. Yeah, I was really pleased to get this one. I had been trying to find a cheap copy, because this would have been, as a single album, this would have been actually very easy to find, but not for cheap. And I didn't want to pay that much for it, because this was such an easy album to find. But now they reissued this with the unissued material, so I was very, very happy to get this one. As was the next one. I think it was sometime last year that they started reissuing Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds albums, and I wanted this one, so I kept asking when is it going to be released. No information, no information. And they just kept releasing albums, but not this one. And there was no information when this was going to be reissued, until I finally saw somebody on VC's Facebook page, and they showed that this was reissued, and I think it was some guy from Denmark who posted it. So I was like, okay, so it's gotta be finally available here. I went to the record store. No, they didn't have it. No information when it's going to be issued. And so it went for some time again, and then I finally noticed that they said on the record store pages that it's finally available. But I didn't rush straight away to the record store to get this one. I went I don't know, a few days later, a week later, and it was sold out. So I asked, when do they get the next batch? No knowledge. So again, it took me some time before I finally got this one, but I have to say that it's a great relief to finally have this on my hands. Okay, I've always said that the Aussie period Sabbath albums have not been so important to me as those made with Ronnie James Dio, but I've slowly started to think that maybe I should get those Aussie albums also, so I started with 13, and I was pleasantly surprised with this one. I would say that everything is good. Aussie singing, songs, how they sound, really, really good album. I'm very pleased to finally get this one. And the next one I was going to pass, Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. I went to, when I noticed that this was released on double album, I went to the store and asked which tracks are on this, because the original single album includes only 9 songs. So I was told that it includes the original album. So I thought the double album with 9 tracks, no. I decided that I was going to look for the original single album. But something made me check this from the internet, and it turns out that this includes all the bonus tracks from the remastered CD edition. So it includes 12 songs. So as soon as I found out that, I went and bought this one. And Motorhead, Bomber, brilliant early Motorhead album. I had heard this somewhere in the 80s, but I didn't really remember what I thought about it. But once I saw this here, it didn't really take me long to decide to get this one. And it's a great album. Remember how Lemmy always says that Motorhead is not a heavy metal album but a rock and roll band. I think this is what he's talking about. These songs, although they are heavy, but they somehow are like, well, they are more rock and roll songs than heavy metal songs. But nonetheless, a brilliant, brilliant album. Okay, remember when I bought the part 1 of this album, Halloween, Keeper of the Seven Keys, part 2. When I bought when I was looking for part 1, I told you how I always saw this part 2, but not part 1. And I wanted to start with part 1. So when I finally got part 1, finding part 2 became difficult. But yeah, now I finally found this one. And I was kind of lucky even to find this one, because this was on a second-hand box at a record store, and I wasn't going to look at those records at all, because I went to the record store and I knew which records I was going to get, and I just looked for those, but something made me check the second-hand bin and I found this one there. And okay, next one. These 2 singles are everything that I've ever had from Quiet Riot, so I decided that it's finally time for me to buy an album from them, and I bought Metal Health. And when I got home, I played this, and when I got to the last track, Thunderbird, I was like, that sounds familiar. But I was like, well, okay, maybe I've heard it sometime on the radio, and that's why it sounds so somehow familiar. And I played this the second time round, and suddenly a couple of other tracks started sounding familiar. And I was like, well, that's odd. How come those sound familiar? And I decided to check one of my cassettes, and here it is. This is a cassette that I recorded in the late 80s. This includes isolated tracks from a few of the albums that I had back in the day. That I didn't like, so I just taped like a couple of tracks from each album and sold those albums. But this one I actually didn't own. This was just a loan from my friend. I just didn't really remember. But it's funny that I don't even remember when was the last time that I had listened to this tape. 15 years, 20 years ago, who knows. But still, those tracks started sounding familiar when I was playing this album. It's amazing how well you can remember just songs that you haven't heard in ages. Still those few tracks started sounding familiar when I was playing this one. But yeah, my first Quiet Riot album. And the next one was Triumph. When I saw this, I thought that this was their first album, but with a different cover. But when I checked the track listing, I noticed that there's Rock and Roll Machine, and I was thought, but that's the second album. So I was thinking that, okay, which album do I actually have? Do I have the first one or do I have the second album? And very uncharacteristically to me, I went to the internet and started checking out that what do I actually have? And I took notes, and this is actually the international version of Rock and Roll Machine. So it includes tracks from both the first album and the second album. This is a British press of this album, so it has different cover to that of the Canadian version. So yeah, good album, but I still need both of those albums, the first and the second, which then will make this one useless to me. But Well, those are difficult. I don't recall seeing those first two albums here, so it may be a long time before I finally get them, but at least I have this one. Okay, that's it for this time. Thanks for watching. Bye.